Welcome to All the Horrible Things, episode 80, the first of the year 2024. And I tell you what, this is going to be a dreamy one.
Yeah. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year to you, sir. And Happy New Year to our esteemed audience. Because we are going to be talking about dream scenario today, you can see I wore my, Dream Heart Human shirt. Big Harry fan here.
My Freddy Krueger.
You got the Freddy Krueger. Very nice.
That was very appropriate for this film.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
It is the thinking man's Nightmare on Elm Street.
It really is.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, today we're talking about dream scenario.
Dream scenario.
A24, man.
Might not see this as a horror, but it absolutely is horrific. It calls back to, as we discussed, Adaptation was a movie that he did, a decade and a half ago now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Which is very similar, where he plays a writer in that as well, or I guess he's an actual writer in that one.
Right.
This one, he's the wannabe writer,
He's a wannabe.
which is very appropriate.
He talks about his book that he has never written.
About plants. No, I mean about ants.
Ants.
And their ant intelligence.
If you look at the IMDb page, though, this is classified as far as genres. It goes comedy and then horror. So it is.
Wow, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
There is a segment of it that is very, very horrific. And I think if you looked at this more of a character study and you're thinking about who is the villain in this, it's him. It's himself, how he kind of is stunting his own life with his kind of passive-aggressive male rage, self-inadequacy issues that he's dealing with. Even though he has a pretty nice life. He has a life most people would dream to have as a professor.
Yeah.
And
it's the classic grass is always greener on the other side. But, I think this really kind of dials into, I think, what a lot of people deal with, about not appreciating what they really have and thinking that there's something else greater. They're always chasing something else when they don't see what's right in front of them. Or in this case, within his own home, which is a very nice house, too. I mean, he's a
tenured professor in the science department, which is coveted because, those liberal arts teachers, there's a dime a dozen here. But science, he's making some money there. He has a good relationship with his head of the department, played by Tim Meadows, which was just such a delight to see him in such an understated role, and he's kind of really the only confidant he has throughout the entire movie as well. The only one we could actually say is his friend.
Yeah,
I would say.
And not just that, it feels like he's somebody who, I don't want to say believes him, but certainly gives him the benefit of the doubt.
Yes. Yeah.
Because his own family doesn't necessarily...
No, they don't have that same sort of, I guess, faith in him would be, because yes, he does his job well. He's a good teacher. We see that at the beginning at his lecture. He knows what he's doing. He could potentially write a book. He just doesn't have that extra sense of self-confidence and follow through that is necessary to do that. Speaking of which, writing a book. The reason this movie really spoke to me, and I'm going to be biased in how much I love it, is because I'm obsessed with dreams, as I've probably mentioned on the podcast before. 8 years ago now, I released my book, Company Dreamer, and while Dream Scenario deals with a pretty banal man ending up in everybody's dreams, at first doing nothing, and then ultimately murdering people, mine is more about the dream recording industry. But where they do overlap is that in the end of this, we learn there's dream technology, which there's a lot of dream technology in Company Dreamer that allows people to potentially go into each other's dreams and watch one another's dreams. And then we learn of these dream fluencers, who are people that are essentially going in there to sell keto supplements. In my book, there's similar themes going on, but it's more of the nature that these dreamers who are the celebrities are having people who want their products or personalities to pop up in their dreams that then end up being, shown like our movies. They have to pay to play sort of thing to get into the lives of these dreamers. So if you did really like Dream Scenario, I would encourage you to check out the book Company Dreamer. by yours truly. All you got to do is go to companydreamer.com, and the link is right there to the book on Amazon. And if you did like Dream Scenario, there's a lot going on in Company Dreamer that's worth liking as well. If you're interested in the dream
Absolutely.
recording industry and where this movie could have gone if it left him and went into this dream tech space, that's kind of what goes on in that
Yeah.
novel.
Yeah, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes
Great.
as well. Yeah.
But I digress. Let's get back to it. Let's start from the top, because I was doing a little research on this, and I thought like the most beautiful quote to explain why this is a good movie is, for a good movie, the ending is really the beginning. And I wasn't totally clear that was I didn't put two and two together when I first saw it, but we're spoiling a little bit here right at the top. The beginning of the movie starts with this flicker of black, right? This flicker, then you're in a dream. You're in his daughter's dream,
Right.
or he's then there standing raking, when then suddenly keys fall from the sky, break the table that she's at. A shoe falls into the pool. And what do you think the big thing that was that crashed into the pool?
A person.
It's him. It's interestingly him, and we see him to dualism of him again in one of his dreams. But the thing to remember, if you've seen this movie, is at the end, he's finally able to make his way into his wife's dream, and at the end of it, he starts floating up, and then ultimately, it's him that's going to crash right back down at the beginning of the movie. So this is beautiful circular loop that I didn't actually catch at first. Upon the second viewing and doing research, it was like, wow, this really well thought out. And we should mention this writer-director, Kristoffer Borgli, who's pretty newcomer in terms of feature films. He's only done one other feature. Have you heard of him?
No, I hadn't. And I think he certainly made his mark here with this movie. This is something I think you're going to hopefully be hearing a lot more as the Oscars start to come a little bit closer. I hope so too.
I mean, because it wasn't nominated for any Golden Globes or anything, right?
No.
So it's kind of an underdog right now.
Yeah.
Selfishly, I don't want it to get nominated, but at the same time I do, it's this bittersweet thing.
Yeah,
but
I wouldn't mind Nicolas Cage getting nominated.
Nicolas Cage, obviously, I think the script, the original screenplay, there are some criticisms out there that argue that he tried to cram too many ideas into it, and that it suffered from that. And I don't know. It was an hour and 41 minutes. And for me, it was like the perfect length. I remember at one point not knowing how deep I was, and I'm like, oh, they better not be wrapping it up now. But they weren't, because we then get that whole third act that's just insane. And a lot of people kind of give it crap as well as being the one weakness. But I loved it, obviously.
Yeah, same here. Would you, and I haven't really broken this down, but when you started talking about how deep you were into the movie and not realizing where you were, would you say that this might stray away from a traditional third act structure?
Yeah. I think it does. Maybe that's why people were kind of confused by it. But because it does loop, maybe this is the point. That why are we following all of these like narrative patterns that one would expect? Why aren't we kind of seeing story as more dreamlike in a way?
Right.
As you can see, the dreams are really not filmed in that different of a way than the reality, which I think leaves you questioning a lot of times when there's cuts. Are we in a dream right now, or are we not? He could have easily put a filter over the dreams, made them all feel, ethereal, but he doesn't. They're, with the exception of some of these crazy things that happen, especially when we talk about the students' dreams, which I found fascinating and archetypal. It's all pretty filmed the same, which I thought was a really interesting and smart approach.
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump from that dream. His daughter wakes up, right? So now we are in the Matthews household. As you noted, it's gorgeous. We get a sense that his kids really don't respect him.
No.
What would you say? The chemistry between him and his wife, it seems lackluster.
It seems they're more like best friends, perhaps.
Yes. That's what I would get. But We initially had this conflict that Paul is going to go have a meeting with his old TA who's getting published on topics that he had hoped to be published in at some point himself, however, has never written anything.
Right.
So he goes to this meeting with her, and his wife's like, "You should record it."
Yeah.
That's another thing going on here is I think this movie does really well in demonstrating that there are so many like different layers to existence that seem dreamlike, that are invisible but still there. Certainly sensory stuff I've noticed. And when he plays back his conversation with her in the car and the way that
so
the
sad.
sound is different, it has like this dreamy quality to it where it's like that's just how audio would be in the dream.
Right.
But I digress. Let's discuss his hilarious little lunch with her.
So he really just jumps right into the conversation. He doesn't really allow much time for reminiscing. He's just like, "Why didn't you credit me?" Which
Right.
is, you know, I think he's feeling the pressure. I think he's feeling right now, as a man, he's feeling less than, and he's just hearing his wife's, I don't know if he feels pressured to actually do the recording, but I think he's thinking this is what I should do because, I want to impress my wife, which he constantly tries to do throughout this film. He's constantly trying. She even says, "You don't need to impress me. I'm your wife. I love you."
Right.
But he's trying so desperately to go above who he naturally is. He's going against the grain. And this conversation, which I really love how this was edited, which I'm pretty sure the director of this film also edited the film. And
interesting.
It is really great how we jump, like you were just describing, the audio. We hear the audio from the recording when we cut back into, he's thinking back at their conversation at the table. Really brilliantly done. And it goes from this place of he's, putting his foot down and saying, "Why didn't you credit me?" to us learning by the end of the conversation, "I really need this. Please, please." He's begging. It's so desperate. And
he is a very desperate character.
Just embarrassing.
And if you remember, before she even shows up at the table, he's practicing how he's going to nod.
Yes.
Like when she says, "Good to see you." He's like, he like practiced his nod and is all looking like he's having some sort of spasm.
It's classic Nicolas Cage. He finds so many amazing things about a character, which there's a really great scene later I want to talk about that he does something with his face. He is so good at acting with his face, emoting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I think it's important to kind of focus also on what his focus is, and it deals with swarm intelligence, and this is then where we get into the whole underlying philosophy, I guess you care, psychophilosophy that's going on, and it's a very Jungian movie. For those of you who've taken Psychology 101, there's the two top dogs. You got Freud and you got Jung, and Jung's all about the collective unconscious. And I came across this really smart, let me see if I can't bring it up. I can't find it now, but it's an assessment of how ultimately there's this dualism in Jung's theory where there is the self-consciousness and then the ego, right?
Right.
And when you're born, it's all these desires that you have and your innate self that is then, as time goes on, kind of then used by the ego to shape who you are. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of your life, it's a marrying of the two where you take that self-consciousness of you along with that ego and you drive your life. Well, the problem is that his inner self is so weak that he's bleeding into other people's unconsciousness, their unconscious selves, which I thought was just so interesting. And then relates back to the Norio being used and how other people can do this. But really, he stops being in other people's life when he does get a sense of, in people's dreams, when he does finally embrace those inner desires and needs that he has that he'd been stifling because of his ego the whole time. He's very self-deprecating. If you remember, after his interaction with his old TA, they then go to the theater. I can't recall. What do they go to see?
I don't know if they say exactly, or I just missed it, but there's this really
we
great...
just see him in the audience, And that's really important because this is all about blending in of what he teaches in terms of zebras. He
Yes.
mentions that, like, why is it an advantage evolutionarily to have these stripes? You think you would see them a million miles away, but he's like, well, when they're together, they all bleed together. You know,
Right.
it's all, you are protected by the mass. And in that moment when he's still in the theater and it's not clear people are dreaming about him, he's part of the mass. But if you remember when he walked into the theater, there was a guy
There's a
leaning
man
against the wall, kind of like, who's that guy?
staring at
I
him.
recognize him. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And then, of course, when they leave, there's this amazingly fun conversation
Oh,
with his ex girlfriend who sees him and
Claire,
runs
I
up
think
to him. What'd you
Claire.
take of that?
Oh, it was another moment where he just doesn't do the right thing. His wife is right there. You could tell exactly if he just looked at his wife a little bit longer, he could pick up on what she's wanting him to do, and he doesn't do it. And Claire is the one who introduces us to the idea that I've been dreaming about you.
Yes.
And then Claire, who wants to basically go out with them just to, she says she has her own therapist, and the therapist says that there might be something that they need to resolve. And his wife is basically like, who are you? How do you know each other? And they're like, we used to
Right.
date, super uncomfortable. And you can
Hmm.
tell the wife wants him to say, no, I can't meet up with you. I'm married, and that would be inappropriate. But if you want to jump to that conversation, this woman is also a writer for an online magazine,
Hmm.
but she mentions young, and she compares what she's writing about to be very, in the style of
Yeah.
Carl. It's so many things going on here.
No, you're absolutely right. I think it's a tough situation in his head because he is always self-deprecating and has so little confidence. And there's a funny
Right.
exchange when she does explain to him the dream and how he kind of just walks by as she's tending to her friend who had just been hit by a car in the
Right.
dream.
He's just
And he's just kind
there.
of like walking by really creepily, just kind of like half smiling, looking at her. Um,
Yes, if you go back to the first scene with the family around the table and the daughter's explaining, it's a very important line where Nicolas Cage is like, so I'm just there. I'm not doing anything. I don't do
mhm.
anything to help. I'm just there. It's a constant um
She straight up tells him, "You're still doing that thing where you're looking for the insult." Like she's
yes.
insulting him. No, she's just telling him about his dream. And as he tries to purport throughout the whole movie, that's not me in the dream. That's just the
Right?
image
It's
of
not
me.
me. It's
He's always thinking somebody's trying to take him down a peg. He's
yes.
victimized. He's a victim in this world. And there's another big theme of it is I feel like cancel culture is he's actually literally brought up later in the
Right.
movie
Right.
because he didn't technically do anything wrong, but because the way people feel about him, he's done.
Yes. He at that point, the way people feel about him, he cannot defend himself anymore. He needs to just accept it.
It's emotional. That it
Exactly.
trumps the empirical. It trumps anything that's real.
Oh my god.
Uh, is the emotion,
It's
and that's there's a lot of criticism now about college campuses today and how the kids are the ones running the show, and
he
it's more
says
about what
that.
they want than teachers want. There's like a great little comic where the parents used to like chastise the kid for getting the bad grade, but then now they're going to the teacher chastising the teacher for the bad grade because can't be the kid's fault. The kid can't
Yeah.
suck.
And I don't want to jump too into this, but I don't know if you've seen the film, which is going to be an Oscar film, The Holdovers.
Yes.
It's a very similar situation where the parents are blaming the teacher
Oh my
for
god.
not
Yeah.
basically for allowing the child to have manipulated him. And it's like, it's
Right.
your fault. You let him do this. And it's very similar to what's going on with this movie. Like
I love that you brought up that movie. I did recently watch it, and I liked it a lot. I like
yeah,
Dream Scenario a lot more, if I'm
same,
honest with you.
same.
But when I was watching Dream Scenario, I thought, you know who else could have done this part? Paul Giamatti. This
He
is a role
absolutely could have.
also tailor made for Paul Giamatti. He could have nailed it. There was actually a moment um, later in the film where people are done with him and don't even want him showing up in public places anymore, and
Yeah.
he's in a diner just trying to read and
Oh,
eat his food. and this big old guy comes over and says, why don't you do us a favor and like get out of here, take a hike, sort of thing. And the way he says, "I'm gonna eat my food," is just so Paul Giamatti.
Yes.
I like immediately like took it on like this. He's doing a little Giamatti here.
Yeah.
But you're right. No,
yeah.
they both do deal with that theme of where feeling your gut is more important than your head, right?
Right.
And I don't
Feelings.
ascribe to that.
Yeah.
Drives me nuts.
Yes. So
what did you think about in his first lecture? The students are kind of laughing, and then he kind of like said, "You just let yourself be targeted."
Yes.
Obviously, those kids, I think, those students rather, had been dreaming about him, and they were probably talking about having that dream for the first time.
Yeah, I think you start to pick up things in the background, like when he's walking by people and he's asking people, "Everything okay?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I think you're starting to learn that everyone is starting to dream about him, and this whole idea of the zebras is, kind of like in that first moment where he's talking about basically popping your head up, and that's when he says you just targeted yourself,
right?
And this, he doesn't realize he is now the main target moving forward here.
Yeah, you can't let the sunflowers grow too tall,
right?
As they say.
Get chopped off.
You do. But then he does have that meeting with her, and I think he was a little excited because I think he could see the jealousy in his wife, Janet. I like that actress a lot.
She's great.
What her name was?
She's great.
Ann Nicholson. You might have seen her in Mayor of Easttown.
Yep.
Really good in this role. Very understated, right? I actually kind of bought that they were a couple, despite lack of chemistry. I could see how they had just kind of grown into this old married couple mode.
Yeah.
But she is visibly jealous, and I think this is something that kind of, gives him a little bit of it solidifies his ego. And as talked about before, he's so driven by ego instead of his own self-unconsciousness that it does then propel him to definitely want to have lunch with her. And he's so sad when he finds out it's not about her wanting to reconnect or still having latent feelings for him.
Right.
It's just about, do you mind if I write about this dream? And as long as you don't make me this hapless loser.
Right. There's a brief moment there though where he does get excited. Where he's like, "Oh, you want to write about me?" And then it immediately is like, "So
right.
yeah, you're absolutely right. The ego is there." He's like flattered, but then immediately doesn't want.
He remembers how he's represented. That's the irony of this whole film. He's so inept. He doesn't do anything in these people's dreams, and he's so desperate to do something when he does become like this phenomena. It's just so funny. When she releases the article, his ex releases the article, then he gets all of these social media messages of people have found him. They're like, "You're in my dream too," right? If she hadn't wrote that article, does this all happen at all? Is there enough people where it would have become a thing?
It wouldn't have spread, right? And I think we get
only because he had that ex.
Yeah. I think we get a little bit of an idea towards the end, and I won't go there yet, but I think, it's about how fast something can spread now, cancel culture and whatnot, because of social media.
Oh my gosh, absolutely true.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, the way things go viral and then lead to the destruction of someone's life. Just recently, I don't know if you saw those hearings about the anti-Semitism on college campuses, specifically. I think like Harvard was one of them. Two of the head of the school. I don't know the actual title of these CEOs of the school. Let's call them. Both had to resign subsequent to their hearing with Congress just because they didn't say what Congress wanted them to say.
Right.
And they didn't define what free speech was in the way that, this particular Republican Congresswoman Stefanik wanted them to say. He's like, "You should resign." I was like, hell, they're not going to resign. It's free speech sort of thing, as long as it's not inciting violence.
But then they do. Yeah.
It's totally what has occurred to him in a way.
As soon as someone demands it, as soon as someone demands it, people immediately want their justice.
And if you don't ascribe, then you're going to get the crazies breaking into your house thinking they need to kill you, like we got this one character after he's blown up. You get this crazy guy who's not taking his meds, bipolar or something.
Right.
And he shuffles into the house. For a second, I thought this was a dream, right? But
Right,
then this
right.
turned out to be reality. He's just breaks into their house, grabs a knife, walks up to the bedroom. He's like, I have to kill you. I have to kill you. And
Yeah, reluctantly, not like it wasn't like because of the fame. It almost seemed like this individual needed those dreams to stop.
and
Eh,
yeah, right,
But there's a really, another great moment here where his wife says, "Do something," and he doesn't.
right.
He doesn't.
No,
He
he
stands
would let
there.
them all get slaughtered if this was somebody that had any extra motivation to
Right.
follow through. But again, here I feel like what's so important is we're dealing with somebody who's bipolar, and again, it can be a dreamlike state living
Hmm.
in that mindset. You know what I mean? This is somebody
Or
who
nightmarish.
has trouble differentiating reality from the fictional space or
Right.
just thought. Because I mean, we kind of just bowled over the fact that like dreams to me, I'm not a religious person. Dreams are the only phenomenon that I really uh worship, I guess. I know a lot of people just believe that they are sort of an unpacking of your day, a filing it in your long-term memory.
Right.
It has to do with what you're nervous about anticipating. I don't know if I buy any of that. There's no proof to that. I don't think anyone can definitively say what a dream is, and I'm not confident that it might not be tapping into something larger.
Sure. It's yeah. It's the same again. Not religious here, but it's almost the same thing as like what happens when you die, right? No one will
Right.
ever truly know, so everyone will have a specific idea and then run with it.
And I mean, the sequence of sleep is just so interesting to me too, is because if you do look at the cycle, right? It's awake state and then the blackness before this fantastical dream. And if you have the capacity to lucid dream, you are literally in heaven. You can control everything you want. Back to blackness, back to life. I just always wonder, is this uh what do we call that, foreshadowing
Mhm.
of what's to come? Sleep and death have always been married, and it's
Synonymous
just
there, yeah.
that's what keeps me interested, is the nature of that phenomena.
Hmm.
Honestly, I think there's a lot of science yet to be done on it that I'm excited about, but let's get back to it.
Yeah, I think the next major event here is that because now everyone's writing about him, he decides it's a good idea to go on the news, which
Right.
again spreads. It, I think a big problem was that now that he put his image out there, and I think Tim Meadows might sort of, uh, kind of insinuate this, like you put your image out there on the news, now more and more people are going to think that they're dreaming about you just because they saw you on the news, and it just amplifies his problem exponentially because we don't know how many people watch this and now might start to dream about him.
It's such a great scene when he walks in, and his lecture hall had been pretty low populated, and then now that he's in everybody's dreams, granted doing nothing,
Doing nothing.
full house. And
Internet
uh
famous.
lesson be damned, let me hear about myself for the entirety of it. I'll give
Yeah.
it 5 minutes to hear about a couple of them, and then like when he's
And then he
not getting what
takes
he
his
wants
coat off. He
from
takes his coat off. All right, let's get into this. Maybe we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. The scientist in him who wants to use this as like a control group. Let's figure this out. And but he really just wants to hear about everyone talk about it. He's it's 15 minutes of fame is kind of what this whole story is about, and how it's not what you want. Fame is not even the police, or sorry, the detective after.
was it a I thought it was FBI almost.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
yeah, okay, it must have been a detective, I guess.
whoever that individual was says fame isn't like what it's cracked up to be. There's a terrible side to it where people feel the need to stalk you or get as close as they can to you,
Mhm.
and he's eating it up. He doesn't want to do anything. I don't think that they can't get a dog. They don't get a security system. I don't think he gets
They can't
any
move
of
from
it.
the house because it's her family house or
Right, she grew
whatever.
up here.
But what's interesting is that she's at least willing to do something, because when he says, "Let me show you the access points that aren't locked or whatever," he just remains sitting on the couch, and we
Yeah,
see him his wife with the kids with this detective FBI agent pointing stuff out that needs to be fixed, and he just remains there doing nothing. That is his, fatal flaw.
That is his
inaction
mantra.
Do shit. Can we talk about some of these students' dreams though? Because obviously this is where I feel like they're tapping into, dream books and what sort of archetypal dreams people
and horror. A nightmare essentially. Let's
first talk about the first wave, right? Where he's not doing anything. The first gentleman to speak up is apparently walking through some sort of like field meadowy sort of thing. And he's eating what he says is a mushroom, but it looks like ice cream.
Yes.
Crazy the way that it's like melting down. That's what's so interesting. You think you're doing one thing in the dream, but visually it's something else and stuff. And then there's all people around him that are like frozen as well, also eating these mushrooms. But then you got this ominous like black and red figure creeping up to him, and he runs away, hides beneath a tree, and then enter Paul. Just strolling by.
But wouldn't you say this might be the first time where he says he's not doing anything, but he is sort of doing something. He walks right up to the mushrooms.
You're right. He does walk up to the mushrooms, and he does actually talk to the kid a little bit.
And the kid's like,
help
Paul,
me,
get down.
Help. Yeah, get down. And then, of course, the guy attacks the kid while Paul just continues musing over, look at these mushrooms.
Yeah.
But you're right. That was the first time at least we'd seen him say something, I guess.
Right.
Then you have the girl who is dealing with an earthquake. What was going on with the other two girls underneath the table during that scene? Because that's kind of like the biggest effects scene maybe in the whole movie.
Yeah.
This earthquake sequence.
Agreed.
It seemed like one girl had like these weird shards that were coming out of her or going into her. That was under the table. But anyways, he's just walking through the earthquake scene like nothing is happening, just strolling around, looking around.
Anything.
Then they cut to one that I'm sure a lot of people have had, which is the losing of the teeth. This kid is ripping a tooth out of his mouth, and then Paul's just looking through the bathroom window at him. And then there was one that I have had very similar ones, and I was like, that's a dream that I've had. And it was this girl who's on top of a grand piano, and alligators are below, slowly approaching her. And I have those sorts of dreams, especially in my youth, around that age specifically, so much. I felt like, okay, that's a real dream.
This was another specific where I find like a different thing happening. Paul walks in, sees the alligator, sees her, and then leaves, though.
That's right. He sees.
To him, I mean, this is another version of him doing nothing. But I loved that he like walked in and then just like,
nope. But it was like he wasn't even like scared. He just like looked at it and walked away. It was so ineffectual, I guess would be the right word. But he loves it. He's eating it up when they're all walking away. He's shaking everybody's hand. Everybody loves him.
Yeah.
And so now he's got enough clout and fame that enter thoughts. Good name for an agency? What do you think?
No, this is a terrible name. And the funniest thing about it, I mean, aside from it being two very well-known comedic actors, Michael Cera and Kate Berlant, she is so funny. I thought the funniest thing about this agency though was they said they basically like just started it. It doesn't have any like history or reputation or clients. I'm going out on a limb here and saying this is their first client because they're putting a lot into Paul.
Yes. And I think that's really corroborated by the end of the movie when he is on tour in Paris, where Michael Cera's there with him, going down to the basement with him, getting angry when the light falls off the ceiling and hits him in the head. I think they're pretty desperate, and as they know that they like him, that it makes sense that he would be associated with the desperate agency.
They need him. They
do. And Sprite is who they try to pitch him, and that is money. So it makes sense why they'd want to get him on board. But let's talk about that beyond the performance, because they're all great. Michael Cera has won this year, 2023. Everything he did was so much fun.
Yes,
he crushed it. And he crushed it in this role too, because the irony is he seems so young, even though he's like, all right, it's your winner now.
Yes.
Like a child who's in charge of this agency. He's wearing this little denim cap and really pretending to be a big boy, it feels like, right? But what I really loved about the scene was that it was snowing all in the background.
Yeah.
So you have this long table, and he's at one end of it, and the two execs, and then Molly, the assistant, is there at the other end. So
Right.
immediately
Molly.
it's like this partition, this dualism, there's the Jungian thing going on there. But most significantly to me is, again, we get the feeling that it is a dream, even though it's reality, because they're on a high rise and there's this snow falling down. So it kind of looks like this fuzzy background. Like you can just see what's here like you would in a dream. You just see what's in front of you, and everything else is. And in theory, what he's doing right there to be able to then call the shots and say, no, we're going to focus on my ant book, is a dream for someone like him to get that clout, to get that opportunity to sell and have agency over oneself, is the ultimate dream, which then, because of Molly, I would say, this is when it began. That's the changing point. So this assistant who brings him up there. Talk about that elevator scene, Mike.
Oh my gosh. Well, you could tell immediately that this girl Molly has had sexual dreams about it. You can tell. I mean, it's just a really great performance. But as soon as they're in the elevator and she starts laughing, you know immediately. I mean, I knew. She's dreamt about sleeping with Paul, and you could tell he's like embarrassed a little bit. He knows as well. And then there's a really great moment after the elevator scene. They're in there. The tension it's carried over from the elevator into this office now, because you're just waiting for this to come up again. It seems to me that Michael Cera's character and Kate Blanchett's character knew about the dream too, because they kind of like allude to her, like, dreaming about you, Paul. And Michael Cera also lies about dreaming about him, which is hilarious. But Molly has this really great, awkward, she's not in the meeting. She is still
she's
thinking about her dream or dreams, and she is just staring at Paul. And Paul gets a glance of her, and then he's also embarrassed. He looks down. He feels immediately like he's doing something wrong.
Right.
But after the meeting, Molly, you could tell that she needs to act on her dream. Like, she wants this to come true, and she invites him out for a drink, which you kind of knew was going to happen, but he fights it, and he just goes back to his hotel room to call his wife.
Right. I do want to backtrack 1 second, because it's very obvious in the elevator, but I think what's key is it's the first time, because he asks, so I'm just doing nothing in your dream, right? Like everybody else. You go, no. This is the changing point. This is when he realizes, oh my gosh, my inner self might be able to do stuff. And this is kind of what then leads to him essentially being willing to cheat on his wife, which to me that's where his inner self just completely breaks down, and he becomes this monster, because he's never going to get over that guilt.
You're right.
And it is important to note, though, you mentioned he goes back to the hotel, he calls his wife. There's this funny moment where he's like, yeah, they said they think I'm the most interesting man in the world, and like his wife just like snort laughs, because she knows how boring he is. But it's very important also to note, this is the time that we learn that Chris, the guy that she works with, I think it's at a museum or something, they're putting together some sort of,
sounds like they're talking about like exhibits and whatnot.
So he's there at their house, and Paul's follow-up question is, okay, where are the kids? And they're out trick-or-treating with this boy that was alluded to earlier, that his daughter might be into. This during the honeymoon phase, where everyone was loving him and he was popping up and he was a celebrity. The kids suddenly thought he was a cool dad, in his mind at least. His daughter actually wanted him to drive him to school. And before his incident with Molly, even Janet is sexually interested in him again. We get moments of chemistry that we hadn't got before. Most interestingly, though, we can't run over this because this happens before the Molly incident. She's like, so there's other people dreaming about you. And he's like, does that turn you on, sort of thing? Or is that
this is
intriguing
amazing
to you? And then he's like, but you don't dream about me, right? Which is another... really, it's a thread that pops up in here. One of the main dreamers doesn't dream about the other one, and whether or not they're in love, which is in there, in that company dreamer. But he then asks her, okay, what would you like a dream of me to be about? And she says, I would love to see you wearing that from that old Halloween where you wore the talking head suit. For
Yeah,
those who don't know the talking heads, it's a
big
band
suit.
where they have these oversized suits.
David
And she
Burns.
just says, and I want you to be save me from something.
Yeah.
Nothing even in particular, save me from something. And he laughs at her.
Right.
He does not take that seriously because in his sexual fantasies are obviously very different. And then when he gets to Molly and hears about her sexual fantasies, that is what he wants.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. He wants to be not just doing something, but he wants people to be almost the cliche fantasy.
Right.
And then his wife's it's comical. And
Right. But
again,
it's also he's the hero, and in
Yeah.
hers, he's this intruder hiding in the shadows who then ultimately, forces himself on her to a degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very different. That's what turned him on. So he's so lonely in that hotel that he ends up with her. But did you notice there's this one scene where he's like in the lobby and he's eating dinner and he's
Yes.
eating squid.
Oh, I guess I didn't realize what he was eating. I just realized
this
he was
big old squid tentacle right before the cut of the frame. I was trying to think about the significance of that, and I can just go to like squid don't they have ink
Yes,
in them?
they do.
So maybe it's like again he's eating his capacity to actually write. I don't know. I'm digging deep there, but the ink in the squid thing and his inability to write.
I mean, what you just wouldn't. That might be something you dream of. In a dream, I was eating this big tentacle. It
was like a big tentacle,
like a steak, and it was also weird that he was sitting at that couch and like leaning
on a couch in like the lobby
down
with a big old coffee table he's eating it on. It's just he's like so desperate to be around people and to connect at this point because he's already been lavished with a little bit of attention. Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah. But the scene at the bar where he and Molly are talking, it's almost gives you a look because now it's Halloween and someone steps in wearing him as a costume.
Right.
Which
Being
is
John
like,
Malkovich style again, too. If you have not seen Being John Malkovich, there's a lot of this interplay of his face.
But it's like the ultimate idea of 15 minutes of fame. Like what was popular that year, I'm going to be that.
Like the Harley Quinns of 2018.
Exactly.
That's a really good point. And also, going back to Halloween is this one day that is like a dream because everybody is not
everyone's walking around as a monster.
So that was appropriately timed for this event. But it's just such an awkward exchange too. It's not the sort of date that you think would lead to going back to her place. He makes some jokes that just don't land. Check, please.
Yeah,
I mean that's certainly a dated thing when you've had it with the moment and you're like, I gotta get out of this table, and she doesn't get it. She's born in 96. I think that's when he says it.
He started his career.
Yeah.
As a professor.
It's just like the ultimate fail of a date, but is it saying something about the generation she is? I assume is that a Zennial or is that an early millennial? But that they are attracted to like the victim, the sadness.
Potentially.
He's obviously not an attractive man as portrayed.
Correct.
Why? It's just I find it. I think there's something going on there deeper that I need to investigate.
I think you're right. I mean, if you walk through her fantasy as she's explaining it to him at the table, I'm sitting there on the couch. You're in the corner. I don't know who you are. She literally says, "Who are you? Don't hurt me." And then it jumps from that immediately into physical contact.
Right. Is it like I mean, again, this goes back to kind of I don't want to use the word snowflake or anything, but just like it's almost the fetishizing of victimization.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They want to be a victim because then that gives them power in a weird way.
I think it also is double downing on the whole cancel culture. And a lot of people who had celebrities that were canceled were men who forced themselves on women, when women did not give their consent. And I think
Right.
that might be a big part of why her
Oh,
fantasy
yeah.
was something like that, and that he's being fantasized about. And that,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Lecherous, and he's getting this Harvey Weinstein on pretty much, you know?
Yeah.
And in a weird way, in the back of people's heads, like, yes, they were victimized, but then look at all the good that came from being a victim, sort of thing. I want to be the Rose McGowan, you know, and came back for a year with relevancy, you know, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Sadly, because of something so horrible. I don't know. There's a lot going on there. But yes, okay. Well, we can't not talk about what happens, the dream versus the reality. So she brings him back.
My God. This shouldn't be as funny as it is. It should be gross, but
cringe.
Man, did I laugh.
Oh my
and you know what? I've laughed at a lot of moments building up to this. The way we're talking about this movie, we haven't really talked about how funny it is, too.
Oh,
but like
horrifically funny. Absolutely.
Horrifically funny. So immediately when they walk into her apartment, he's like, all right, where do you want me? Like you know, like walk me through your fantasy. And she's like, could you take your coat off? And like he immediately goes to the corner, and she's directing him to go back further so I can't see you.
Right.
I don't want to see you. And then, I mean, I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but when he gets to the couch, it is the exact opposite of sexy and romantic and, dare I say,
passionate.
Yes. There's no way that in this dream that this man, this version, is the type to overpower her, which is what she wants. Or
even be the instigator of
right. She's directing
carnal activity.
He does not take the lead because he literally does nothing. And I mean, he gets so nervous that he farts.
It's a healthy natural thing, Chris.
Yes.
Farting's healthy, it's natural, it's good for the body. You gotta get it out.
To convince her, and the fact that she is still so into this idea that she moves, I don't know, how do you move past that? That should have been like, maybe this was a bad idea. You should. Right. Nope.
She's so desperate for the dream, and
yes.
she won't accept the reality. So you go fart, and then you go. They do kiss a little bit. They'll really awkwardly beard smashes into her face.
Keeps reminding her that he's married, and she's like,
right.
Yeah, whatever.
That's helpful.
And then this is the scene where I was talking about earlier with his face acting. When he prematurely ejaculates in his pants.
Yeah.
His face acting, his guilt and shame, that we can just see it all in one look. It was brilliant. Oscar-worthy performance.
If he does get nominated, that better be the scene
right?
they use when they show it. Because then it's followed up by another fart, too. So it's fart.
Yeah.
Ejaculate. Fart. And then he runs away like a child.
Oh, my God. Yeah, he does. He does run away like a child.
And she still texts him, though, afterwards, because that's when the wife kind of finds out. Yeah, and that's when we also, like, I think it was really obvious she's into this Richard guy that she works with, too. She's like, well, if you're going to do it, then fine.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
I think the moment after is the scene, correct me if I'm wrong, the scene where he's back home and he has now learned that his old TA or whoever has published her works. And he is just losing. He scares her daughter, his daughter, that she needs to leave the room, go up to her. She has to leave because he is. Yeah. For the first time, we're seeing him actually being terrifying. Like you could say his daughters were scared of him in their dreams, but in this moment, they're scared of him in person, and that's where like this blurred line starts to happen.
And in a sense, that's the first time he actually is feeling the repercussions of his inaction that we see throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
He didn't act when the guy with the knife came in. Didn't lead to anything horrible. This is the first time when he didn't do anything that's done.
Yeah.
He lost his rights to the concepts that she probably yoinked. That's a big turning point because, I mean, you see at the beginning, his daughter's floating away. I mean, this is about his family is all kind of like floating away from it throughout the entirety of the movie. He's losing them.
Yes. They're moving
to the idea of what he isn't. Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
Is there anything we wanted to say about the meeting? Because I loved the moment where it's like, we're going to try and get you into Obama's dream because I know Malia.
That's right. He was really holding on to that. It was just an idea, and he had taken it so far where he's like, this could happen. And he tells his wife that too. They're talking about, getting Obama to dream about me. Which is in this world the ultimate sign of like respect. Really.
Right. Yeah. Doesn't happen though. So essentially, after this incident with Molly is when everything kind of the tables turn. He's now his unconscious self is just completely guilt-ridden, angry with with himself too. And as we noted, because his self-conscious is so weak, it does then permeate into other people's minds through the dreams and becomes murderous. We get this 180 switch from do nothing to kill you. And in some pretty horrible ways. The first one we see, we don't actually see like how she ends, but it's that same student from the beginning who he kind of calls out for targeting herself by talking. And he's like, he shows up at her door and she's like, hey, professor, what can I do for you? He's like, I need your help. And she's like, okay, well, what do you need? He's like, I need to come in. And then he's like, well, I'll just come out. And she's like, no, I want to sit down. He lets her in. And then he just starts accusing her of
being
doing
an
wrong thing. I'm assuming he's either it's a representation of what Molly is to him. What you did this to me, not being able to take his take the repercussions of his own actions, sort of thing.
Yeah,
take responsibility, I guess is the right way to put it. To the point where it's super creepy, even more so than the next one when he just bludgeons a dude with a hammer.
Oh my god!
The other guy who was talking to her, right? That's horrifying. But just the insinuations of what is going to happen with that girl too, because we do learn later his daughters talk about all the tweets about him and how he's not only been murdering people, but he's also been sexually assaulting people too in the dreams.
Right.
He just becomes like
a villain,
like we talked, Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. They're calling him. I think his daughter says they're calling me Freddy Krueger at school. He's like, do you know who that is?
Do you even know?
He's almost trying to like dismiss it. Like, well,
you're right.
Yeah. Like, I think it's also very interesting, and it maybe just it's the way of telling the story. But I think those two students may be, aside from Claire, Zach's two of the first people who you dream about him. And
I think so.
It's interesting.
They've seen his dark side in real life.
Yeah.
And is it possible then if that's no, his daughter does too. His daughter, or he chases at his daughter all week.
Yes.
Which was so comically
yes.
It reminded me of that scene from that Spiderweb movie, Cobweb. Where Homelander runs at the kid.
Yeah.
But do we see any other murderous dreams? I'm just trying to remember. I think those were the two, and then we know he's doing it to everybody.
Yeah.
And it leads to the interaction then between him and the head of the department again. He's like, kids don't want to show up anymore because they're having weird dreams about you. He's like,
feel safe.
Can they do this? Can we do this based on something that's not real? Based on just thoughts?
Right.
The thought police are here.
They don't feel safe. And he talks about bringing HR into it, and now it's like it's a thing. Like,
oh my god, yeah. And that was okay. So then we get this whole we're going to try and appease the students. We're going to have one of these happy time kumbaya meetings in this huge gym with all of his students who have been dreaming about him doing horrible things to them. And you got this poor HR woman who's trying to settle his where. And she is trying to say, we need to get you past this trigger when you see him. She shows him the picture of him, and you could tell they're all like, even by the picture, oh my gosh. Yeah. The feelings you get just by something that's not even 3D, that's not real right there. And then, of course, she brings him in. I don't know if you noticed, but it was very similar to when he's in the corner in the sex dream. Now, in this reality, he's in the corner of a ginormous space. And he's once again this villainous figure.
Yeah, and they're like, "Can you come a little bit closer?" It was like a game. It was almost like a game, like red light, green light.
I mean, it's scary. Is they have control over this guy, and no one's
Right.
willing to acknowledge the fact that that's not him. That is an image. Uh, so then, well, of course, he gets closer, and then as soon as he utters a word, all he says is "so." Everybody gets up. Everybody gets up and runs out of the gym. So
Oh,
he's pretty much suspended or on leave. He's done working at
right.
Rossler.
And they vandalized his car, and
Oh my
now they've
gosh.
got video of him yelling at them, "Loser."
Which
Um,
is his biggest fear, to be considered a loser, to
yeah,
not
yeah.
succeed.
Like this is the exact
Which
opposite
you
of
would think it
somebody
would be
who wrote a
like
book.
creep or freak, but it's
Yes.
loser, which I
Yeah.
think was just so poignant, given his own insecurities.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're just so mean about it. From one instance, they go from like being unable to be around him to then trying to destroy him, having
Correct.
the phone there, because I think it's when he kind of blows up at them for what they did to his car that leads to him then being ousted from the school proper, as well
Yeah.
as thoughts has to then change their direction with how they're trying to sell him at the agency, trying to encourage him to go on Tucker Carlson and be more like the Jordan
right.
Petersons of the world.
Yeah.
Talk to Joe Rogan about how it feels to have been canceled. Uh,
Jeez.
it's actually really heartbreaking, and he's not a very
It
likable
is.
character. You know what I mean?
It
But you
is.
just can't help but like. I mean, certainly as an academic, and I know the power these kids have, and it's scary. It's pretty.
Well,
Scary.
I think one
It's
of the
not how it
students,
used to be.
I think one of the students even yelled, "Why don't you just quit?" I think they were just
Right.
trying to like take that away from him.
Yeah. I mean, what's terrible is it even goes beyond him, because then we learned that Janet, his wife, is kicked off of her project because of him, just because of the association with him. The way that cancel culture will ruin the lives of those around the person that's targeted. This is why it's horror. The destruction of a life. We are seeing the destruction of someone's life and their hopes and
Yeah.
dreams, ironically.
I mean, the school no longer wants him to show up to see his daughter's show.
Oh.
Um,
Yes, his daughter's recital, and then he has this really awkward moment with the teacher who's saying, "We don't think you should go there." He's like, "Do you know I have a PhD?
yeah.
What do you have? A BA?" She's like, "An MA."
Yeah, I have an MA.
He's kind of like putting his place a little bit.
Yeah. It's yeah, he's starting to like kind of
We
fall apart and turn
need to talk about his dream about himself.
Oh my god.
If that happens before he's not allowed into the recital even.
Correct. He's now like working out and running, which I think we see him try to do that at home on a treadmill.
Yeah, he treadmill a little bit. He went a couple steps.
So in his dream, he's taken it to the next level where he's running down the street, and then all of a sudden an arrow hits him in the arm, which is so symbolic of what he was talking about as far as hunting and prey. And he is now being hunted like a zebra on its own, running. And he, I don't know, the path, he ends up back in his own yard. And then he gets another arrow in the back. He's got 2 arrows in him, and he can't do anything on his own. He can't pull the arrows out of his arm. And then we learn who the hunter is. And did you, in this moment, did you know it was one of his dreams? Did it take a while?
I had a feeling. I definitely, when I saw somebody hunting him, I'm like, this has to be him. We're going into the being John Malkovich territory again, where Malkovich goes through the door, and then everyone around him has his face in his own weird portal
version.
What do you even call what happens and where they are in? Oh, they go into somebody else's head, so he goes into his own head.
Right.
That one. But I kept saying as we were watching him, like, that's him. But they don't actually. She didn't really look like him from afar. Sort of thing. It looked like somebody that was, much more alpha, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And then it is revealed as him. But what I found interesting about when he finally does dream about himself is this is the first night he's kicked out of his bed with his wife. He's sleeping on the couch.
Right.
So now he has that same sort of horror that other people might have affiliated with him, because what has he done to himself in real life? And now he's killing himself in his dream, which leads to his totally ridiculously self-serving confessional on YouTube to the world.
His
I'm
apology
killing me in
video.
my dreams too.
Yeah.
Which goes over like a lead balloon, or it's his daughters are pissed off about this. It essentially is what gets Janet to tell him to leave the house. Uh, it's kind of interesting because he goes from his bed to this amazing bed at the hotel, and then back to his bed. But then now he's on the couch, and now he's kicked out of his house, and now he's sleeping on this cot in the basement of Tim Meadow, the head of his apartment,
That has a
where
weird
you
smell.
can't turn off the light.
And
The halogen light is above him, and you can't turn it off.
He's like, can't I just sleep on the couch upstairs?
No. It's just his actual literal physical sleeping comfort has been diminished so much. That's what then leads into where we find out about the Norio and the dream influencers, because it's kind of this weird cut where he puts his hand over his eyes trying to sleep with the halogen light above him, and then you cut to the funny actor from Succession, who is the inventor of this Norio bracelet, where you can actually go into other people's dreams.
Nicholas Braun, I think his name is. Greg from Succession.
Yes, he plays Brian Berg, the inventor of this. Perfect role for this guy. And then you have all these really douchey influencer characters, all living in the dream house in the Hollywood Hills. And then he's dreaming, and then we get two influencers pop up in his head. And he's like, no. And actually, they had mentioned, like, if you say leave, we'll leave immediately from your dreams. And he says, no, get out of here. And they don't. He's like, no, I'm not going anywhere. And then another one pops up and says, don't punch him, but if you do, use this keto supplement. And then he like screws up his line in the dream sort of thing.
Let me take that again. Funny. I can do that better. That other actor, the first actor who shows up is, I mean, there's some other cameos here. Like, he was just in one of the DC movies. And
really? Oh.
And then I think we had one of the actors on the couch who talks. She was the star of Prey, the alien movie, where she's the.
Oh, no kidding! I missed that.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I didn't know if there was significance to that, or if they were just fun cameos to pop in here. But they certainly fit these influencers. I mean, like, the one kid is just jacked. Like, he is just huge.
I think this is where critics are saying there's too much information crunched in, but I feel like the payoff is good enough to have put this in here. Because ultimately at this point, we know the marriage is pretty much in shambles. He's now looking for houses of his own, thanks to, interestingly, a settlement that he got from his university. So he clearly sued the university for wrongful termination, right? So he's got the settlement enough to look for moderately priced homes that have a animal smell lingering.
Yes.
Again, it's one of these things like a dream. It's there, but it's not. You can't see the smell, but it's
the dead animal
continues to permeate.
The dead animal that pops up in his dreams. Is that a dead dog laying in there?
Oh my God! Yeah, I forgot about that too.
It's just so weird.
But significant to the Norio is because their relationship is crap now. There's this beautiful moment where he's dropping him off, and they have this awkward thing. Well, when's the next time I see you? I'm going to Paris for 4 days. And he says, oh no, I'll come back and I'll see you before I go there. And she's like, no, you don't need to. But he has this like delusion in between that.
Yeah.
Where he kind of like grabs her hand, whispers something nice in her ear, makes her laugh.
Yeah.
But that's his dream.
No.
And then he goes to Paris, and it's the most pathetic thing you've ever seen. He's hawking what looks like a pamphlet of a book that was initially titled Dream Scenario. That they changed to I Am Your Nightmare.
I Am Your Nightmare. Well, the photo shoot with him in the medieval Freddy Krueger glove is so good.
And he keeps saying, I don't want to wear this. No, I don't want to wear this. No, wear it. Just do it. Just do it. He has no agency again, and now he's being remembered for exactly what he didn't want to be remembered for.
Right.
That was part of his whole discussion with Sarah in the first time. He's like, I don't want to be remembered for this dream shit. I want to use this as an opportunity to up my academic side.
But then he goes along with it. He's like, it's okay. Maybe it's okay that the title is okay. And like, it's so against, like, it's like, it's already been printed. What can you do? Like you
Right.
know, he's just
I think,
still a pushover.
but yeah, I know I'm trying to justify it because you're right. It is kind of a contradiction if you want to look at the end, hopefully. But is it maybe that he's finally just
Accepted.
embracing what's
Yeah.
happening in reality versus trying to control it? Just embrace it versus
Potentially,
control,
yeah.
because he does get a Norio for himself. That's why he had the influencers pop up, but he's doing it specifically because he wants to get into her dreams. He wants to
Right.
reemerge or emerge for the first time because she's never dreamed about him in her dreams. um and he does, I think, at the end, right?
Yes, because the guy who's saying, or like it's like a YouTube video, like how to get into someone's dream, which is just so
Yeah,
scary.
right,
He also
right.
says that person needs
Has
to
to be
be
willing.
like willing and like accepting of it, or this won't work.
Right.
So she clearly,
She let him in.
yeah,
She let him in,
and
which means
it's
there's this little bit of hope.
and the
And
reveal
it
of him
was,
walking with the suit
oh
is
gosh,
so
it's like
funny.
really, really touching. Like when I first watched it, I found that last scene absolutely heartbreaking, and I thought
Yeah,
him floating off meant that they were never going to be. But
yeah,
I hadn't really put two and two together that she had to let him in that
yep,
dream, which is so important. And if his floating off is just the beginning, the end being the beginning,
right.
then
There's hope.
he can maybe try again with her.
There's hope.
That's what I'm getting the
Yeah.
sense of. He
I
can
think
start the
he
dream
even
again.
he even says though, "I wish this was real." Like,
I know. It's so
it
sad.
is very sad.
Adaptation is really sad too, and there's a lot of similar themes in it. And to me, this and adaptation are by far his best performances. I love Leaving Las Vegas, but it's
Right.
one of those ones you don't watch again, because it's so depressing.
Yeah.
We loved Willy's Wonderland recently, but he doesn't have a line in that whole movie.
Yeah, and it's more of an
Um,
alpha male, and these roles that Nicolas Cage really,
mm,
uh, I don't know, just sort of like excels in, are these men who are kind of just losers,
yeah,
and he brings something so just human to them, where you could feel bad for them, or sorry, you can look at them as losers, but you could still feel bad for them. There's heart there, and they're not, they still are people.
yeah, I think he's the perfect person to be cast for it. As no Giamatti probably could have done. I could actually see Jim Carrey actually doing this well.
Yeah,
But the
yeah,
thing is with Nicolas Cage is I feel like he has kind of run that gamut of being considered this amazing movie star to being considered this washed up like star who takes crappiest roles ever. But like he's reproved himself in like a Nicolas Cage renaissance of sorts of late.
yeah,
That I felt like his own personal mentality, the meta-ness going on there, was what was making this so effective, a part for him to play. Uh,
yeah. I mean,
we can't forget the fact that one of the producers on this is Ari Aster. We did mention this when we had our Aster cast.
yes.
And that plays a big part because I saw a lot of Beau is Afraid in this too.
Oh, absolutely. The whole idea of just wanting to scream at your television or your screen, where you're just like, just do something, was so reminiscent of Bo. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
they're both kind of just losers, lovable losers.
Lovable losers. Yeah. I mean, those are some of the most interesting characters to watch because I think there's more of them out there than anyone's willing to acknowledge. And the stories, I think, probably hit home harder than, you know, Jason Statham's characters.
In defense of Nicolas Cage, because I do believe he is one of, like, I don't even want to say underrated, because I think a lot of people know how talented he is, but he doesn't get the credit necessarily for all of his roles because he takes some sillier roles,
Right.
like, even like Willy's Wonderland. I mean, it wasn't going to get him like an Oscar nomination, obviously, but I think this guy really loves playing, and that's a lot of things, or a lot of other actors I don't think can do the silly stuff because they take their job too seriously. And I think Nicolas Cage knows that he can do something for everybody. He can bring something to every.
That's a really good point.
And he's got three different children at, like, I think they're all different ages, and I think he's, I think, you know, sometimes he does things for his kids.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
like
mean,
the
of
National
all
Treasure
the
movies, you know, like,
right, yeah. If you look at his actual life as an actor, because it started so early,
yeah,
his life is like a dream more than maybe any other actor because
yeah,
of the variety of roles and quality of roles that he takes. It just runs the entire gamut.
yes,
His life is a waking dream where he's waking up every other month in a new world.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
he's like the perfect actor for this part because his life is dreamlike. I mean, he
yes,
freaking had T-Rex skull at his place for a while before the tax stuff. And like you had mentioned, I think he does some stuff for the money so that he can do stuff like this that he knows is not going to make a lot of
oh
money,
yeah.
but is going to be meaningful and last the
Well,
test of time.
I mean, I can see wanting to do things. I mean, it's a job. And like I
Yeah,
think a lot of people who are just look at themselves as just being an artist who won't sell out. I think that's kind of like whatever, you know, like this
yeah,
guy is doing a job, he's making money, he's got I don't think there's any it's not a secret that he's like had problem like financially, like he had gone bankrupt at one point. I think he does movies to, you know, build his wealth back up and, you know,
right.
leave money for his kids or whatever.
Yeah,
I just think the guy treats it like a job, and I don't think there's anything wrong with like doing sillier roles.
I completely agree.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's an Oscar
for
winner.
me, it's one of those exactly. He's a freaking Oscar winner.
Do whatever he
Um,
wants.
he's not a joke to me. He's one
No,
of some of my favorite movies of all time.
say
And this is the top 5 of 2023 for me. So,
100%. One of my favorites.
um, without question, I mean, it might be in contention for top 1, 2, 3. And this is another thing I just want to mention. Like, it was the perfect length. 140 minutes is how long a movie should be.
Yeah,
I watched recently all these other ones that are in contention right now. Like Killers of the Flower Moon, really amazingly,
sure.
beautifully shot, amazing performances. But my God, just make it a miniseries, man, because
Yes.
it was too long. It was too much. It stopped being enjoyable at a certain point because you're taking so many breaks that you're watching it at home, sort of thing.
Right.
And then watch it in the movie theater. Well, hello, my bladder. Jeez Louise, what
Exactly.
happened there? So I thought it was the perfect length, and I just thought it ended so beautifully and looped so wonderfully. I'm excited for what this guy can do next as Borgli,
Definitely.
as long as he stays out of the dream space. You get the hell out of the space, jerk.
Yeah, that's your territory.
Speaking of which, yes, I just want to remind people, if you did like this movie, go to companydreamer.com and take a look at my novel. Additionally, back in 2012, we made a web series, me and my friend Scott Allen, called The Inside Company, which is essentially what the dream recording is all about as well, but it kind of solidified some of the ideas that became the novel, where we
Cool.
take real working actors in Chicago at the time who, you know, were wannabes, wanted to be, you know, bigger. And we gave them the parts of these these dreamers in this world. And then we did the whole read through of a 12 episode series. It's on YouTube, The Inside Company. You'll get to see me wear some silly hats, including a fedora.
The silliest of hats.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's all I got.
Same.
Thank you so much for listening, y'all.
Thank you so much. Hopefully you get to see this movie and we didn't spoil it too much.
Yes. Yeah.
Check it out anyway. It's so good. It's so good.
It's on VOD right now.
Yes.
So definitely check it out and like, subscribe. And until then, stay alive.